I'm Max Brantley with the Arkansas Times. Monday, March 28th, post-Easter. Beautiful spring day. News from John Lyon of the Arkansas News Bureau, some additional reporting on Governor Asa Hutchinson's plan to require drug testing of all recipients of Medicare, of welfare payments in the form of temporary assistance to needy families. He notes still more information from still more states that show this legislation, which is a cookie-cutter version here of something passed in several other conservative states, costs far more to implement than it produces in any savings among welfare recipients found to be on drugs. Asa Hutchinson said last week that this isn't about punishing people, it's about doing something about drug dependency, but in fact, a very tiny number of people have been helped by this. If we want to do something about drug dependency, we should take that $1.5 million that we've set aside to test welfare people and make it available to all people that want to do something about drug dependency, but that's not what this program is about. Other good reporting by newspaper journalists in Arkansas. Michael Wickline in the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette over the weekend rounded up the number of free trips that had been taken by Arkansas legislators in 2015. They're required to report that. This is interesting because we passed an ethics law, voters did, that we thought we'd limited expenditures by lobbyists on wining and dining, had cut down the ability of legislators to take free trips. Legislators took care to write into the law a little wiggle room. They wrote in something that you could take educational trips that aren't strictly speaking financed by lobbyists. I've taken Michael Wickline's reporting a step further and looked at some of the groups that pay for these trips to places like France, China, Florida, Colorado, and found that if they are not directly financed by lobbyists, they are financed by organizations that certainly employ lobbyists or are financed by businesses that have tremendous amount of interest in issues before the legislature. You'll find that looking at these groups that mostly Republican legislators took advantage of, they typically are financed by conservative business groups that have a very clear agenda for charter schools, for lower taxation, against regulation of industry, those sorts of things. There are a handful of progressive groups that finance some small trips, but nothing like the Koch money and other big interests that are out there still paying to send Arkansas legislators on trips to fancy locations. They assure us they're working very hard while they're there. Donald Bobbitt, the president of the University of Arkansas System, met this morning with the Board of Trustees of Pulaski Tech, the two-year community college based in North Little Rock. They're talking about potential merger. There was no action today. Pulaski Tech's interested in maintaining its identity, and Bobbitt's interested in more efficiency in education, but he says that doesn't necessarily mean an end of all duplicative programs, for example, between Pulaski Tech and UALR, the UA campus that already exists in Little Rock. New reporting by me this morning on the Supreme Court Justice race, Chief Justice race, that Courtney Goodson lost to Don Kemp. A report Goodson filed after the election shows that in the 9 days running up to the election, she loaned still more money to her campaign. She's loaned her campaign at least $641,000 based on money she's raised so far. She's going to have to eat that debt. She's deeply in the hole, her campaign is. An interesting thing I also discovered was that after too late for this to be known before the election, $35,000 came into Goodson's campaign from class action lawyers in Pennsylvania and their wives, a law firm that's come under some notoriety for being very involved in Supreme Court races in the past and also getting a big contract with the state auditor's office. Good news and bad news on the human rights front. Texarkana, the city of Texarkana, passed a city ordinance that guarantees non-discrimination for its employees and also says that it will not do business with companies that discriminate. This is particularly about sexual orientation, although not exclusively. Well, the same people who tried to fight this kind of ordinance in Fayetteville stirred up opposition in Texarkana. They've called a repeal election for early this summer. The good news on the human rights front, at least temporarily, is that the governor of Georgia, Nathan Deal, he's a Republican and he's a staunch Baptist, has vetoed a so-called religious liberty bill there that is nothing but a pretext to discriminate against gay people, particularly married couples. It's a reaction to the legalization of gay marriage by the U.S. Supreme Court. He said his religion doesn't talk about discriminating against anybody, and he can't find that Jesus ever did either. The good religious people of Georgia are up in arms. They're talking about overriding his veto. Sad news in Little Rock today. Chris Beard, who led the UALR men's basketball team to a 30-5 record in his first season and coach, did get a job offer from UNLV at presumably a much higher rate of pay, and he's going to take that job. UALR is looking for a new coach. Chase Conk, the athletic director at Little Rock, wishes him well. It was one good year. Sorry it couldn't last. They tried to raise his pay, but UNLV fired a coach who was making $750,000, reportedly offered the job to somebody who turned down $1.5 million. Beard was only making about $250,000 a year at Little Rock, and although they were going to improve his pay, they undoubtedly couldn't match what the big money at Las Vegas was able to offer. And finally, a little piece of city government news. I learned over the weekend that the billboard companies are still at it. Some years ago, the city moved to try and eradicate billboards from the city. They lost. Billboards won, although the city was able to supposedly create some scenic corridors where billboards would be reduced. These include the Mills Freeway, by the way. I know you know there's still billboards there. Well, the billboard companies aren't happy with the billboards they have on the Mills Freeway. They want them to be flashier. They want to convert them to digital billboards. So there's an ordinance up before the city this week that will allow them to convert those billboards to digital. Now, they will, in agreement, in return for this agreement, take down some minor billboards at several other, maybe as many as a dozen locations around the city. You can bet they aren't as high profile and as unsightly as those on the Mills Freeway, but that's as the billboards turn. I'm Max Brantley. I'll be back tomorrow.
You feel it in your heart, the spirit of Little Rock. We've had that spirit since 1927, helping build our city by producing decades of leaders in the heart of our state. We are the heart of business and innovation, the heart of politics and government, the heart of arts and culture, and in our city beats the heart of a Trojan. UALR, we are Little Rock's team and Little Rock's University.